Okay, let's go. Parashat Vayishlach. So we are going to learn in a different way, and I prepared something with AI, and it is going to help us learn in a voice of a woman instead of me. So 7 minutes of the lesson itself will be by a tool called Notebook LM. And we won't go into the details of how, but I put in an article and I told him to do all kinds of things with it. And one of the things that he did was this presentation. So let's go. Since it's a very known story about the wrestling of and this guy he met at night. I said guy because in the verse itself it says ish, which is a man. And later on, we maybe understand that it was some kind of angel, or because it's a weird story. So let's learn about it. So I'm sharing what we have to share. And this is the tool. And I am widening the story. And everybody sees?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. 7 minutes.
We're about to jump into one of the most famous stories in the Bible. But what if I told you that the most important scene, the one that makes everything else make sense, has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years? Today, we're going to solve the puzzle of Jacob's secret battle. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to lay out the mystery. Then, we're going to dial up the tension, really feel what's at stake. And finally, I'll show you this incredible, elegant solution that just makes everything click into place. So, the story of Jacob meeting his brother Esau again, man, it is a masterclass in building suspense. But then, right when things are about to explode, the whole story just stops, and we get one of the absolute weirdest, most out-of-place events in the entire Bible.
And this is the big question, right? The one that's bugged people for literally centuries. It feels so random, so completely out of left field. But here's the thing, understanding this one bizarre moment, it's the key that unlocks the whole shebang.
So let's set the stage. Jacob's been in exile for 20 years. Now, he's finally coming home, but there's a huge obstacle in his way. His twin brother, Esau. You know, the one he totally cheated out of his birthright and his blessing. We're talking 2 decades of bad blood about to boil over. Okay, so the first part of this story is basically designed to give you and Jacob a heart attack. Seriously, it's just wave after wave of dread. Every single detail is screaming, this is going to end badly, like really badly. Jacob isn't just a little nervous here. He is in full-on 5-alarm panic mode. He sends out some messengers, they come back with some truly awful news, and he immediately starts making these desperate, calculated moves. He's convinced he's about to be wiped off the map.
And that awful news, it comes down to one number, 400. Now, you gotta understand, 400 guys isn't a welcome wagon. In the Bible, that's a small army. That's a battalion. Esau isn't coming for a hug. He's sending a message, and it's a deadly one. So let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. Jacob's fear is off the charts. This is not just, oh, I'm a bit worried. No, he genuinely believes that his entire family, we're talking every man, woman, and child, is about to be slaughtered. He's bracing for complete annihilation. Okay, so that's the setup. A night of pure terror. All this frantic prep for war. Now, let's fast forward to the next morning, because what actually goes down is, it's a total shock. Instead of the bloody showdown we were all expecting, we get this. Esau runs to Jacob, hugs him, kisses him, and they both just weep. It's a beautiful moment, for sure, but if you're looking at this as a piece of literature, it's a huge problem.
What gives? Why build up all that incredible tension, all that life or death drama just for it to, poof, disappear? Was Jacob just being paranoid the whole time? It almost feels like a cheap trick, right? It makes the whole first half of the story feel, I don't know, pointless.
And you can see it right here. The story has this total split personality. The night half is a horror movie. It's all about fear, survival, and grim calculations. Then the day half is a family drama. It's emotional, peaceful, and all about reconciliation.
They just don't feel like they belong in the same story. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you break it down like this, that the events of the day are a perfect mirror image of the night before. See that? The same steps in the exact same order. The only difference is that in the second column, all the fear, all the hostility, it's just vanished. Something huge must have happened in between. So, how do we solve this puzzle? We have to go back to that super weird all-night wrestling match. Because the big idea here is that this scene isn't some random detour. Not at all. It's the pivot point. It's the hinge that the entire story swings on. This is the whole key, right here. That wrestling match is what changes everything. It's the bridge that takes us from the night of terror to the day of peace. It takes a story that was speeding towards a train wreck and completely turns it around. The big question, of course, is how? Okay, so here's where we get into some really cool ancient commentary. The idea is that this mysterious wrestler wasn't just some random angel. He was the Tsar of Esau. Think of the Tsar as like a spiritual representative or a heavenly double. It's the celestial being that embodies the very essence of a person or a nation. And this is the moment where everything should click. The idea that Jacob was literally wrestling the spiritual essence of his brother, that single thought is the master key that unlocks every single weird, contradictory part of this story we've been talking about. So, let's reframe this whole thing. What if the real fight, the one that actually mattered, wasn't the one on the battlefield with Esau and his 400 men? What if the real climax of the story was a battle that Jacob didn't even know he was about to have? So check this out. The wrestling match was the real showdown. Jacob grapples with Esau's spiritual double all night, and at dawn, Jacob wins. That spiritual victory directly causes the physical outcome. Esau's heart suddenly changes, not because he had a change of mind, but because the battle was already over, won by Jacob in a completely different realm. He doesn't even know why he feels different. And the ultimate proof of this transformation? The name change. The angel literally changes his name. He's not Jacob anymore, which means heel grabber, the guy who uses trickery and deceit. Now he is Israel, he who strives with God. He's won his status out in the open through a real contest of strength. He's finally earned it fair and square. So once you see that wrestling match as the real climax of the story, suddenly all those confusing, disjointed pieces we talked about, they just lock into place perfectly. Just think about it. This one theory solves everything. Esau's bizarre change of heart? Explained. The reunion that feels so anticlimactic? Now we know it's not the climax at all, it's the result of the climax. All that insane tension in the first half, totally justified because the danger was 100% real until Jacob won the battle we didn't see. It all just works. So what this story is really doing is pulling back the curtain on a much deeper idea. That what happens here on Earth is often just a shadow of a bigger unseen reality. The fights we can see with our eyes, they're often not the only fights going on. The outcomes are decided in a place we can't even perceive. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful and maybe even personal question to think about. What if our biggest, most important victories aren't the ones everyone sees? What if they're won in those private struggles we have, alone, in the dark, just before the sun comes up?
Okay, I hear a lot of quiet.
We're still in shock.
Now, before I put up questions,
Well done.
I would like to hear any remarks or thoughts before the questions.
The question that's always troubled me from the moment I saw your what you sent earlier this week is what part of this amazing presentation was scripted and what was added by the AI agent. That's what I'm just trying to figure out.
I think we should leave the AI on the side now. Let's deal with that in a different talk.
I agree.
But let's talk the content and the message and the thoughts we
100%.
have on this lesson. This is a lesson by Rabbi Hannan Summit. Yair knows him from Yeshivat Har Etzion, from Gush Etzion. And I put in the lesson, and the AI did this work and remarks on the content, on the lesson itself.
It still doesn't quite explain the essence of the struggle that took place. And why did Jacob win? Because if we take a look at all of the questions that he had and why he doubted, that he was concerned that terrible things would indeed happen. So there were real reasons for that. And like the script also describes, he had done things that were very serious. So what suddenly redeemed him of all of those things that he did wrongly in the past?
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah. Hi, it's Dina. I don't really agree with you. I think for me, it answered a lot of things. I think it did explain that the struggle, the spiritual struggle, the internal struggle that Yaakov went through, that's what made him victorious. I think it was very interesting and important. I thought it was terrific.
No, but
it did.
what exactly won? What, I mean, if you did wrong, if you wronged your brother very seriously, what happened in that struggle that took place that gave him the edge over Esau? That's what I'm trying to understand. And by the way, I'm not saying I don't have an answer. I'm saying that I didn't necessarily see it in the script.
I wonder if it was simply that he persevered, was that he didn't stop. And because wasn't it the angel that said it's almost dawn or it's dawn? Just a thought.
No, beautiful thought.
I was interested in the idea of the unseen world in some ways being stronger than the world that we see. There's a famous verse in the New Testament says, "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." And the idea that the unseen world is more real than the seen world is interesting, and it helps us not to focus on the details of what we're being confronted with in our life without asking ourselves the question of what is God doing that we can't see in this situation.
Okay, yes, Alan?
So in Hebrew, this appears to be a nisayon, a test. So it's a test of the individual. He's struggling, presumably, with divine forces. We know the name of the divine force is the Sar of Esau, the angel of Esau. And echoing what Natalie said, the mere ability to persist and survive the confrontation is human versus divine, which is one heck of a contest to win if you're human. So if you walk away limping and you're still alive, you're in pretty good shape, all things consistent. And if it represents some kind of eternal truth, the ability of Israel, because he's renamed Israel, to be the eternal nation, meaning chosen, then there's a whole lot of symbolism in the conflict and in being able to persist and survive the confrontation. I think it ties together a number of Jewish themes that I'm familiar with, which is the eternal nature of the Jewish nation, the ability to strive. The name Israel means to struggle with God. So the renaming seems to be the signature on the outcome. So if you struggle with God and you survive, that means you have leveled up your spiritual essence, your spiritual potential, and which is really the whole point of a nisayon, that, or a test that God gives you. So that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you. That brings up something I was thinking about, was the question, who was in the fight? If we are talking about this spiritual force of Esau and not Esau himself, which we meet only in daytime, in the morning, maybe Jacob enlisted for the fight at night, not he himself, but the spiritual force of Jacob. And in that way, he proved that he is using the idea of Israel. And that's why he got the name. So it isn't man against angel or man against spiritual entity. It's Jacob enlisting, taking the forces out of himself to send to battle his spirit, not his personally, but of his people, the people he is intended to be father of. And that is what brings to the decision in the end of this hinge of the story. What enables the morning to come is the name that now he purchased. He won his name in this battle. Now, how come he physically comes out limping? That's a good question, but anybody else?
Yeah, I saw Joshua had his hand up.
Yeah. Sorry. For me, the two things about the man and then Elohim. For me, those two are prominent in the text. And I think, and this is me, that the Shar, the one you're calling is it Edom or Esau, had unfinished business. The issue of the birthright, probably, I'm imagining, the issue of the birthright, among others, probably, had not been settled. And that is what I'm calling unfinished business. And so this kind of struggle is to settle the accounts. And probably in that process of settling the accounts, Jacob still has to get himself broken in the process. How that fits in the whole story is, of course, another story. But for me, there is the wrestling here has to do with, in a sense, Jacob proving himself that actually this birthright is rightly his. And because this struggle, of course, goes back to Rivka's womb, the struggle with Yaakov and Rivka. No, the struggle with Yaakov and Esau in their. That's the way I'm looking at it. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Let's go into the questions.
If it's okay, I just want to offer my impression. My impression is that the struggle itself is the win. In other words, the fact that he cares, that when he did something wrong and he recognizes that he did something wrong, he struggles to make it right. And even if he can't completely make it right, because we do see that he limps, and we do see that he suffers, and he doesn't instantly become Israel, but he will, in the future, he will become Israel, and he knows that he's on the way to becoming Israel. And like Natalie said, he's persisting. He's able to survive this struggle until he ultimately becomes Israel. That is the win. It's not that he's suddenly, because he struggled, he's now in the right. I think it's the struggle itself with himself, and also his attempt to even make it right by giving all these. It's almost like he's giving back all of his blessing to Esau, sending them forward. He's like saying, this really belongs to you. He does everything possible to make it right, and that's why he gets the respect that he needs from his brother.
Okay, thank you, Yair. And let's go, if you all look in the chat, we will see our three questions. I think we dealt partially with the question 2, but let's go. The lesson itself, the presentation, ended with the question number 1, our greatest victories won in struggles no one else sees. So if anybody wants to take off from the Jacob and the night into this question, I'll be happy to hear. The second question, what was the spiritual struggle or ordeal that Yaakov had that night? And we were talking about that now. And the third question, did you yourself experience a spiritual struggle or ordeal that changed your life? And can you share it with us? So whoever wants to answer any question from here, and I'm not putting up a clock, I have a problem now, but please, not more than 2 minutes, okay? So I see Rick is waiting. Let's go.
Unmute.
Okay. I think there's a struggle between the natural and the spiritual. I think that struggle we all experience. And I think Jacob has had 20 years of experience of dealing with physical reality with Laban. He's initiated his own problems stealing from Esau. When Jacob meets Esau in the morning, well, before that, he sends out gifts to Esau and instructions with those herders. You're to address Esau as master, and you're to tell him his servant, Jacob, is sending these things. So there's already a change in role. Jacob, who has been scheming to be on top, is now taking the position of a servant. And he's trying to undo the stealing that he has done by giving back to Esau those roles. And I think that struggle is true for all of us. We wrestle. It's the story of God coming to Cain and saying to him, if you do what is right, you will be honored. That sin is lying at the door and desires to have you. You must overcome it. And that's the struggle through the night. We have to overcome over and over as long as we're alive on this earth. But resolution is promised and is coming.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Who else wants to add to any question? Neil, I would like to hear you.
You got me, huh? I agree with what was just stated by Rick. It's notable to me. Sometimes these things come up in our dreams, which are also important and life-saving and enriching. And in this case, as I think was mentioned, 20 years, it's like taking poison and giving it to yourself. It's a freedom that was done by facing the fear there. And also I wonder about the hip socket situation too. That injury itself, sometimes these mental things manifest themselves into physical ailments. I wonder if that might have been the result there. But great discussion. It's so life enriching to hear. And I give AI a credit on this one. It was an interesting beginning for this session.
Okay, thank you. If talking about a hip disconnection, Yair, when I was living in Tzfat, 1977 till 79, I had a car accident. Maybe you remember me on walking with stilts and so on. I had a disconnection of the hip, and
Wow.
For a whole year I was grounded and couldn't go back to my squadron to fly. But as we talked about resilience and persistence, they wanted to ground me. And I said, no way. And I went to the Tzfat hospital and worked on it. And I went back to fly. And I won the 1982 war flying in Syria, Lebanon, and so on. That's my personal story. And Christiane, anything to add? Jocelyn?
Yes, I hear you, Moshe. 2 years in a row, I broke my leg. Yeah, I had 4 times I had to sit down because of broken foot, ankle, leg, and yeah, operation and all. And it's in that moment that you feel so alone and so disqualified to do anything for yourself. And it's a time that I believe now, looking back, God is a relational God, and he wants to have a relationship individually with one. And that's where it was the greatest time to connect with him. It's that moment where I couldn't do anything. And then when I started to go on crutches, then I started to learn different ways to serve myself when I was daytime by myself. And yeah, like you share, at night, it's the worst time. You wake up, you doze off, on and off, and where does your mind go? It goes with the past, it goes with things that you haven't done, that you should have done, and those thoughts. So I think Jacob was battling a lot with his own self, with what he had done in the past, was coming to that point where he got to be alone with his God and realize that, wait a minute, I'm being called to be a leader, but I'm not there. I need more to be the leader that I am called to be. And that makes me think he was hanging to his brother's foot or heel. Was he saying, don't leave me behind? I need you to help me out to be the leader that I am to be? And then he has this mother that put all these thoughts in him that you are to be the leader, but then he's scared and he follows his mother. He follows her thoughts instead of his own connection with him, above him. It's like there's so much in that story, the psychology of the mind. It's amazing what the mind can do if you don't conquer it.
Thank you. Very nice overview. Thank you. Jalonda, are you with us? Eve?
I am.
Jalonda, okay.
But the story of Jacob, I just listened to Jocelyn, but it was foretold that he was going to be the leader. So I believe that everything that happened to him or everything that he did was to ultimately to lead him there. So that's my belief. And the same thing for all of us. Everything's already written. So every path that we take in, good or bad or indifferent, is going to eventually lead us to where it was ordained for us to be. So that's how I look at his stories of strength, of courage, of perseverance, of resistance. And ultimately he realized, he had to do what he had to do. And to come into and to face such divine, my God, entity, and he recognized, I'm not gonna let you go. You have to bless me. I need your help. So I think that was the most humbling part of Jacob, and it speaks volume of him. Besides everything else that he did, stole the right of Esau, but Esau willingly gave it up. I probably would have done the same thing. You want my soup? You're going to have to give me something. But that's just my story.
Thank you. Eve, are you with us?
Yeah, Eve's got his hand up.
No, it's okay to give Eve. Let's hear Eve first.
Eve? You're muted. Yeah, you're muted, Eve.
Okay, let's.
Yeah,
oh,
sure.
Here she is.
Yeah, actually, everyone, thank you. For me, everybody's input sounds like looking at a diamond. So everything that everyone is sharing is building up the whole picture for me. I'm reading on this one. And I like the AI inputs and the very American voice, idioms and manner of speech. That was really interesting. But then all the other deep thoughts that are coming in from every angle. I'm afraid I'm being so selfish here, but you are building up something for me to understand my own struggles and the dark times in my life. Maybe something that perhaps everyone has mentioned is that this thing that says weeping only endures for a night and joy comes in the morning. that if we persevere, a time comes when there is a daybreak in whatever somebody is experiencing. And I'm really going through a very difficult time. So I'm just saying, okay, Hashem, thank you for sitting me up and telling me, now pay attention, my daughter, you need to understand these points. Are you hearing what people are saying? And I'm taking the notes into my spirit. So may the day come, may I have that perseverance, but also the humility. Yolanda talked about the humility bit. And maybe also recognizing where my own errors and mistakes have brought me to a certain place of wrestling and challenge and conflict, and how Yaakov at the beginning says, God, I'm not even worthy. I am sorry for how I have done it all wrong. And then he makes the attempt to put things right. So a place of humility, I don't know, sometimes one feels so self-righteous about the struggle they're going in, and that it isn't fair, it's not justified, what is happening. But recognizing and coming to a place of humility, for me, I think is a deep lesson. And yes, let us wait for the day to break. Let us wait for the dawn. And who knows, when it comes, yes, we might be a bit disjointed. There may be an injury, but there will be a blessing and a name.
Amen.
And my prayer, that is my prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Denise, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you. I came in a little bit late, but I am familiar with the story and I've been listening to the comments. And what I'm thinking about is my personal story. When I was 16 years old, I dislocated my knee and it was very painful. As a matter of fact, any kind of a painful situation I've had since then, even the breaking of an ankle and childbirth, is always compared to the pain of the knee. Is it worse than the knee? And the knee is always the worst. With childbirth, we know that it's going to be over at some point. But with the knee, I was actually left in the nurse's office for 4 hours with nothing but an ice pack, and I was in excruciating pain, and I had no idea what was going to happen to me as a 16-year-old young person. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think about the struggle that Jacob had and how the Lord, in the end, the grace of God, changed his name and he gave him the answer. He blessed him. And here he's not, we think that his brother's going to come and he was afraid of all of that. But all I could think about is when I think about Jacob is the fact that his hip was put out of joint forever. Like he was always going to have that reminder. Not the pain was a reminder to him throughout the rest of his life of the great grace, mercy, love, and deliverance of God. I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking about. And I don't know if it really makes sense, but I just was thinking about that always reminded him the pain, actually, even though it was something uncomfortable, it reminded him of the goodness of God and there was a purpose for that taking place.
Thank you.
I don't know. Yep.
Thank you. Christiane,
Yeah.
you have your hand up.
Okay. I've been thinking about identity. Rabbi Sachs talks about it, and I've read other things from Israel 365 about identity, and I feel that, and in my own life, it certainly happened in the darkest hours of my life. There's a change that occurs, and I think Jacob went through it. I read a book during that time, the darkness of the soul, and during those dark hours of the soul, God intervenes and actually change identity. And that's what happened to Jacob. I feel that he went from Jacob to Israel. And when that trauma happened to me in my life 25 years ago, a few years later, when I got my bearing back, I used to say I had a change of DNA. My personality changed dramatically from what I was, who I was before, to what I have become. And in the last 25 years, I've grown into that person that after the darkness of the soul time in my life. I know for a fact that during the most difficult times, that's when God get a real can grab us and change us and transform us into the person, the creation that he wanted from the beginning. And although we cry and scream and that we don't want it, those are the times where the most dramatic transformation happen in oneself, and it's an identity crisis. It's an identity transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think what Christian is saying, I have in mind when you find yourself, like I'm finding myself now, where somebody is doing something that is not right. It is not right. And when you engage in conversation, he still insists that he is right. And you have to find a way of helping the person as you help yourself to correct the person. And yet he insists that he is right. And in that process, you actually discover that you also need to transform to a certain extent. And because what I have in mind is you have somebody for example, in a fellowship, and he is a senior pastor, or he's a pastor in charge. And then he insists that you have to do 1, 2, 3. And you know that 1, 2, 3 is not right according to scripture. So you take it upon yourself to correct that person. He is senior than you, the ministry. And so there is an aspect of being, there is an aspect of humility. There is a temptation to bash the person because what he's doing is not right. So that is the kind of struggle that currently I find myself in, where you have really to find ways of helping the person to see the point, to see the sense. And it sometimes exposes that dark side of yourself where you feel you can become worked up. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else want to add something? Yes, Yair?
I just want Neil's question about what is it about the Gida Nashe, that the femoris tendon, what is it, what does that symbolize? And I'm not quite sure, but if not mistaken, it's a very tough tendon. It reminds me of the, how do you say, Am Kshe Oref, where God himself says that we have a hard, how do you say that? We are stiff-necked people. There's a certain stiff-neckedness that I think others have also referred to, that it's a really redeeming moment when we realize that we have been too stiff-necked and we haven't been, and that we actually need to change. And that's a very difficult thing for Jacob to do and for us to do. And it has great implications. A really interesting example is what happens with his children. Because the next thing that happens after this story is that he goes to a place called Sukkot and he heals. He goes through some kind of a healing process. Clearly, he did undergo some kind of a process. But when he goes into the land afterwards, he runs into the story with Shechem, where he has his 2 sons, or maybe more actually, who deceive the city of Shechem. So the deception continues. His children continue to do the exact same thing that he is now sorry that he did. And he gets angry at them because he realizes that it was wrong. And even when he blesses them on his deathbed, he doesn't really bless them. He really scolds them for continuing to deceive. So we can see here on one hand how difficult it is to change and how what we do has consequences with our children. He has one son, Judah, who is capable of saying that I was wrong. So some of his children have learned from him to rectify what was wrong. Some of them didn't. So the fact that we do not eat this part of the animal, the Gida Nasheh, seems to suggest that we recognize that this is something that we have to work on for generations. It's not just a one-time thing or a one-generational thing. It's something that we really have to work on to this very day. But thanks, Neil, for raising the question, because I think it produces some interesting thoughts as to what the symbolic meaning might be.
Thank you, Yair. I see Natalie with her hand up. You're muted.
I just want to say quick personally too, it's so good to be with you all. I was with Dr. Yehuda and Joshua last year in a Jewish course at Africa International University. So I've been reading along on Enome and hoping to join. And I have a schedule conflict, but today I got to be here and I thought I'm going to actually be with everyone. So last week also I got into the app and that was great and could read and watch. And so I appreciate everything you've done to help us to share together. So I am right in the center of a wrestling, like right in the middle. So it's just incredible to me that this was the Torah portion. The Lord gave me a dream about giving me a new name last week. Like it's all just unfolding. I wish I could tell you the whole story, but where I've been wrestling is being black and white, knowing light and dark, right and wrong. My question is, who is the enemy? Is it the angel? Is it Esau? Is it me? Is it the demons from my past? What am I fighting against? What am I wrestling with? And like Joshua was saying, I think it's exposed. What it's exposed in me is also what I'm wrestling with. And I think what I've uncovered thus far is it's an insecurity that I have with God and not knowing his full nature. So that's something that I have to have humility to face that. And it's really hard. It's really difficult.
May Hashem give you the strength.
He will.
We can all identify with that.
I would like to share a struggle I'm having with myself. I do sleep at night, but you can say that it can take the sleep out. He called upon me to join him in a meeting or meetings with a group of organizations that are intending to bring forth some kind of coalition of groups trying to work on an interfaith relationship between Jews and Muslims. Here we are doing Jews with Christians. And I have to say that I have questions about it. From one side, I really think that in the long term, the truth is that all mankind, all religions will see that we're all connected to this one God, to Hashem, and going in his path. But in in these 2 years that I think now is day 710 that I am enlisted in the IDF. I just came back an hour ago, 2 hours ago, from Tel Aviv, from my post. It isn't easy. We have a battle, a real battle for life. And it isn't some kind of national struggle. It's a religious struggle. You hear it from their side. So it isn't easy. And I'm struggling, and I'll find my way.
Thanks for sharing that.
Okay. Anybody else want to add? If you want, I can show you the tool. I won't go very deeply into it, just to show you, to get the idea of what happened over here. So I'm sharing my screen, and I am choosing.
I see that Joshua has also raised his hand.
I didn't see. Joshua, what did you want to add?
What I actually wanted to add was just giving a context of what I was talking about. When and I know a number of us are Christians, and you're in a congregation, and you are required to stand when you are reading the Gospels, but not when you are reading the Torah or the prophets. And that is replacement theology. And you also know that the Apostles' Creed is to some good extent anti-Semitic. For those of us who have had and are believers and have taken time to study it, and you want to help the pastor to realize that what he is requiring people to do is actually historically something that the church has done against Israel. And you are put in that context where you have to help people to really understand that what they are doing is not right. And then they are looking at you very suspiciously and thinking, hey, what is happening with you? And that is where now the aspect of humility comes in, and the aspect of wrestling and the aspect of time. That is basically the context of what I was sharing. And I must say, looking at it now, it is something that takes time. Working on yourself, finding strategies of helping people actually to begin to realize that historically, some of the church creeds and some of the practices of the church are actually set against Israel and against the Torah and against the purposes of God. So that is basically the background of what I was sharing about the struggle, trying to help the elders of the church and the pastors to realize, hey, historically, these creeds are actually against the purposes of God, So that's the context of what I was sharing. Thank you.
Okay. So now I'm ready. So let's share. And we'll take the screen and go. Do you see this screen?
Yep.
This is an infographic of the same thing that we saw. Here, the night and the problem of a night of terror that actually comes to be a daytime friendship between Yaakov and Esau, and the pivot of the solution to understand this is that there was a spiritual victory of Jacob wrestling Esau's guardian angel. So this is an infographic made by AI, of course. So let's close this. And this is the tool called Notebook LM. It's a Google tool, as you can see up here on top in the URL. And all you have to do is to create a new notebook. This was the notebook that I began with. And as you see, there are about 17 sources over here talking about Yaakov wrestling with Esau's angel. The original one of Rabbi Summit is this one, Yaakov and Esau, Struggle Secret. And this is the article itself, as you can see over here. Okay. And then what I do, I can chat with it. But let's leave this alone now. Or I can go to the studio. And in the studio, all I have to do has nothing to do with prompt engineering. All you have to do is click. If you click infographic, it made the infographic that I made, that you saw just a minute ago. If I wanted a video overview, it made the presentation that we heard of 7 minutes. So I prepared a few of these. There's a mind map and an audio overview, which is a podcast, and a slide deck, and flashcards to learn the material, and a quiz to check yourself, and reports, all kinds of reports. What I did later, after I prepared the lesson that we saw, it prepared, not me. I asked him to prepare a lesson. I sent him to look for other articles, and he added 16 other articles, which I checked, and I uploaded them too. So now he has 17 different articles on the story of the night struggle. And then I went over and asked again to have a new video overview, trying to explain the difference between the different explanations brought up. And you can see over here in the table in the middle that this already is showing that the interpretive school dealing with this story talks about the textual portion and the rabbinic, Rashi and the Midrash, or the allegorical from Philo and Maimonides, which is a rationalist, and the modern critical, or bring other ideas of who was this Ish, who was this guy. And just to show, it made, here we have the infographic that we saw just a minute ago, but then I made a different infographic of all the 16 sources. So it, of course, may say different. Now I'm creating it on the fly. This is a different infographic about the same story, explaining from Jacob to Israel the struggle that forged a nation, and that takes us from Yaakov, the supplanter, as you can see in the figure, to Yisrael, the God striver, and the different explanations, different ways in which who did Jacob wrestle, according to the rabbinic tradition, the modern critical explanations, or the theological explanations. So it's a different infographic because it created it not from one source with one idea, but from 16 sources. So this is the way it works. And I suppose in the future, we will see more and more of AI, which you always have to check that it isn't hallucinating. That's the word that goes with AI. You have to check that it's doing the right job. So I'll undo the share.
Wow.
If anybody wants to comment. Okay. Yes, Alan.
So one of the things I find with these various AI products, they don't always have access broadly or deeply into a lot of Jewish sources. So you can get some that way, but there are a lot of sources that are usually untapped or unknown even by AI. unless you're working with a specific Hebrew database, like one that may be at Yeshiva Har Tzion, where they have databases of deeper sources. So you always have to double check AI products with their outcomes or outputs, because there may be some on Hebrew topics, on Jewish topics, because they may superimpose non-Jewish concepts on Jewishly oriented questions. So
I agree. But what is special about the Notebook LM is that you can decide what database it is going to deal with. So if I put only one source in, and I put in, I think, the whole portion of Bereshit, of Genesis, in, and let it work, and it found very interesting topics or ideas, and then it is confined only to what you gave him. It doesn't take from everywhere. So when I put in those 16 sources, I checked them before I uploaded them.
And so you can delimit it. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right. But that is in that tool. Notebook LM is specific that when it deals with the knowledge itself, not its own language, but the ideas will come from whatever documents you uploaded to him.
Right. Whenever I've used Google AI or some of the other chat, I would try to preface my questions as using Jewish sources only, or something like that. Even then, you may find things creep in that you have to edit out, but I try to delimit that because I don't know of a specific database I can point it to. But I see what you're saying. If you're analyzing a particular block of text that you control, then you can limit the analysis to that block of text.
Yes, there's a verse saying in Hebrew, Ashrei Adam, which means beware. You have to always be cautious. And that's what we do. Okay, I am over.
That was a wonderful presentation and discussion. Thanks everyone for participating. And we look forward to next week. Again, we will have Dina will actually be talking about next week's Parsha. So everybody have a wonderful week in the interim. Wishing you all a Shavua Tov.